We're going to be starting out today by talking on this podcast about the Ilhan Omar thing, as it's kind of spread a little bit to today. We're going to, first of all, look at this map of Africa to kind of explain first, because there have been accusations trying to basically state that she is being anti-Semitic. Now, when we understand the Semitic areas, you will understand in history that there is an area of southern Semitics that actually extend down here, which contains Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, that are known as southern Semitics, that would actually dispute the actual point of being anti-Semitic. Even if you look at people who actually make the accusation of supporting Palestinians as being anti-Semitic, technically Palestinians are Semitic themselves. So those who oppose Palestinians are actually being anti-Semitic themselves, which is actually ironic because of what they're actually making the accusations themselves. But now we're going to go into the lobbying of AIPAC to actually show her actual thing of what was one major point. Now, while I don't stand with Ilhan Omar's actual overall points, where she's basically having a point of only representing Sunni Islam's needs in the Congress, which is really not what you're supposed to be doing, and you're supposed to be representing the actual Constitution, and then right after the Constitution you're supposed to be representing your people of your district. She's not doing this, which is a problem. But what we can do is we can actually look at one of the important things that she brought up, which is she brought up one of the major groups, which is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and how they actually have been basically looting the United States Treasury and basically trying to not only bring up bills, but also influence the way any bills come through. One of the things, the United States and Israel Space Cooperation Act. Frankly, we know exactly the way that's going to go. We're essentially going to be spending 100 anything Israel wants for space exploration. We're going to be spending 100% of it. This is on the 115th Congress. This would be the session during 2018. Israel Anti-Boycott Act. This is basically a violation of the First Amendment, and frankly it is something that they want to actually support, even though it's a violation of the First Amendment. Combating BDS, which is boycott, divest, and sanction. This is a Combat BDS Act of 2017. And this is essentially a violation of the First Amendment as well, because you're essentially trying to cripple these groups, and they have a right to free speech and a right to assembly. That's another violation of the First Amendment. The Hezbollah International Financing Prevention Amendments Act of 2017. Now, basically, you're talking is, if you look at our actual idea on foreign policy, what it was originally was we're not supposed to engage in foreign entanglements, which means we're not essentially supposed to engage in theft. That is number one, theft. And number two is we're basically, by essentially not allowing a independent group to finance themselves, number one, and number two, we're engaging in foreign entanglements by working with something that has no impact on the United States itself. Hezbollah has no interest in the United States whatsoever. Their only impact is basically making sure that there's no expansion of imperialism within the area. The major imperialist threats are when Israel is basically trying to aid Sunni groups such as Saudi Arabia, such as the Yemeni rebels, which are Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Nusra, and these other groups like that are being supported by UAE and Saudi Arabia to fight against Yemen. So they're and this is what's being essentially what they're trying to do, and they're basically trying to essentially establish some type of rule of order. And this is what this essentially is trying to block. And all they have in their charter is against imperialism. They want to essentially establish so that basically so no country can essentially invade another, and they have an actual thing where basically where sovereignty is protected. You can't enter a country without being invited, and pretty much the basic idea of what would be in the U.S. Constitution. Another one, sanctioning Hezbollah's illicit use of civilians as defenseless shields act. There's actually been no actual evidence that that's even happening. Though there have been evidence of Israel using them, because Israel was actually found using commercial planes as and flying military jets behind them to essentially run as protection. And this is what was happening. The Hamas Human Shields Prevention Act. This is another one with which is basically, if you look in the originality of where Hamas came from, Hamas is actually formed by the Mossad. This is essentially equal to the CIA of the United States, and it's for Israel. So essentially, Hamas is not a Palestinian group. It's essentially an Israeli group. And the only reason why Palestine joined up with them was because they had no other option for protection. Even though it was an Israeli group to essentially discredit them to begin with. I mean, and you find a lot of these other types of things. These United States Israeli Security Assistance Authorization Act. That's basically them going to us and making us pay for their whole defense. S-170, Combating BDS Act of 2017. That's another thing from the Senate doing the same damn thing. S-2497, the United States Israeli Security Assistance Authorization Act. That's us paying for more of their defense. S-2504, United States and Israel Space Cooperation Act. That's us paying for their space program. S-719, United States Israel Cybersecurity Cooperation Enhancement Act of 2017. That's us paying for their cybersecurity so they can essentially spy on us, so they can basically find out who's essentially using their free speech to essentially say enough's enough with their militarization of the area, and saying they don't want innocent civilians shot, and they'll essentially try and work these BDS and anti-Israeli things through again. And that's what ends up happening. Here's another one. Israel Anti-Boycott Act, S-270. Here's S-612, Udall Park Land Exchange Completion Act. Frankly, with it, there should be no. They shouldn't even have their name on that. That means they're basically trying to tab on where they're getting funds from something of that. H.R. 5895, Military Construction, Veteran Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriation Act. That's them trying to get more money. And H.R. 5952, Science Appropriations Act. That's them trying to essentially steal more money from us. And you keep going all the way down the list. And it basically, the Taylor Force Act, which is basically just trying to give money to the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, but the Palestinian Authority itself, and they lobby to block that. And this is basically another one, Wireless Telecommunications Tax and Fee Collection Fair Act. They're even lobbying on that, and this is basically what they're doing. This is basically what they're doing. They're basically going through these things and they're lobbying on nearly everything. And if we look at all these bills, we can see quite a few of them. We go back to 2017 and you'll see more Israel Anti-Boycott Act, Iran Ballistic Missiles and International Sanctions Enforcement Act. You got to understand that Iran has multiple, not only U.S. Military bases, but also other countries' U.S. bases, other country bases pointed at them, and they're merely doing what any country could have the right to do, which is have ballistic missiles to essentially protect themselves. Essentially, what this is trying to do is trying to basically make the decision for another country, which is illegal. Iran has the full right to protect itself. And what this is trying to do, this is trying to say they don't have the right to protect themselves, and they have to basically be completely defenseless so that any other country can come right in and destroy it. And that's why Israel is actually trying to push for it, because Israel wants the destruction of Iran. It's not that Iran wants the destruction of Israel, it's Israel wants the destruction of Iran. And it's been it's been stated countless times by Netanyahu. And if you look at it, it's most likely because Iran is actually a Farsi country, and they are not a Semitic country. And this could be a lot to do with it. Essentially, you're not part of our people, so you don't belong. More of the Combating BDS Act, Israel Anti-Boycott Act, Countering Russian Influence in Europe and Eurasia Act. This is basically trying to keep Netanyahu in, is the reason why, because they don't want essentially him removed, because he's a lovely neocon. Saving federal dollars through better use of government purchase and travel cards Act of 2017, which is kind of humorous that they're actually putting lobbying there, because they're actually trying to, guess what? Trying to essentially make sure they get more money out of us, which is really ironic with the name of the actual act. Combating BDS Act of 2017, Military Construction, Veteran Affairs, Related Agencies Appropriations Act of 2018, Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriation Act of 2018, and you keep going all the way down. And they keep basically taking advantage, and it's every single year. And this is only one of them. And this is basically, if there's one thing that basically that Ilhan Omar was basically stating, it's that this is what they do. They take advantage of the United States. They might not be giving as much money to these actual people that they're donating to in the campaigns. They only might give a small bit, but when it comes down to the actual legislation, is they're there for nearly every single bill that comes through. I mean, right here, Iran Sanctions Relief Oversight Act of 2015. You know they gotta stick their nose in the middle of that. And then right here, a bill to extend the Iran Sanctions Act of 1996. You know they want to basic. You know they basically want to keep on Iran sanctions, even though it's illegitimate. All it does is hurt the actual American consumer. And frankly, Israel doesn't care. They don't care about that. The only thing they care about is the destruction of Iran. They're basically they're an illegitimate nation that basically doesn't even understand how to actually run a country except basically steal from other nations. The reason why I'm calling them illegitimate is because a legitimate nation runs their actual country with what funds they take in through taxation, and they run it naturally with actually dealing peacefully with their neighbors. They don't do that. Their idea is basically take weapons from other countries. They basically do through lobbying and threaten people around them. That's called a bully. That's it. They're nothing more than that. And they're pretty much doing that. And then anytime basically that lobbying time comes around, they go, oh, we're Jewish, so the Holocaust. Guess what? You didn't live in the Holocaust. Your nation was actually founded previous to that point. Your nation was actually founded on British anti-Semitism because they wanted to get rid of you, so they threw the Palestinians out of their own country. And that was actually anti-Semitism on the British. And they did this rearrangement because they wanted to ensure that the Russians were not going to have relations in the Middle East. This is why they carved up the whole thing, making sure that the whole system was basically going to be where the Russians were going to have relations with the Middle East, and basically creating a solution to get rid of the Eastern European Jews. That was it. And then the last of the Treaty of Versailles was basically having the French occupy Germany. That was the whole solution of it after the war was started, from the British basically being paranoid of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians actually possibly coming into a trade agreement. This is how everything started. Now, there might not be a good solution with it right now because we have but the only real solution is essentially would actually be to cut these people off and tell them, no, we're not giving you a damn dollar more. This is the only actual legitimate solution because they don't deserve any more money. We're so far in debt because they dragged us into the Iraq War. They basically had us be their essential de facto military. And this is not just them. This is also the other Sunni nations. And frankly, we need to tell the whole area that we're gone and it's over. And while Ilhan Omar was able to at least bring up some lights on some of it, we're going to basically have to tell her side, which is CARE, that we're not going to defend their side either. and we're gone, and we're going to actually leave the whole area. There is nothing for us there. This whole area is garbage, and it's not worth anything. If anybody wants to trade with us, they're going to have to do it on their own. And we're going to have to tell every country in the world, no more foreign aid. Not a damn cent. This is the way it goes. Is these countries are just taking advantage of us. And with a debt that's over 21 trillion, and it's causing this. And you look at our defense budget, it's basically bloated so far it's not even funny. We're spending over $700 billion a year. You know how much we could actually spend at a max and still be the most powerful defense in the world? About 250 billion. That's about a third of what we should be what we are currently spending. And we could do that and actually defend the U.S. and the U.S. only. The solution to that: get out of the UN, get the UN out of the U.S., tell NATO to get bent and they're on their own, get out of all these other world countries and only defend the United States only. It's real easy. United States and United States territories only. And do it as the idea of sovereignty. We're only responsible for our nation ourselves. That's the way every nation works. You're not responsible for the world. If that were the case with it, then why does Israel not defend every other country in the world? When Syria gets attacked by these rebels, why does Syria not defend Assad? Why do they attack Assad? Because the fact is they're not responding on this idea of being good steward to the whole world. So why should we? And that's the whole point, is nobody is responsible for the whole world. You're responsible for your own nation. This means no more foreign aid. And frankly, I think we should do the same thing with public aid. Is you're only responsible for yourself. This is where charity comes in. No more foreign aid, no more public aid, and no more corporate welfare, and the whole thing. The government needs to be bare bones. And when we do this, we're going to realize that things are going to go a lot more smoothly. We can pay down our debt easily. And eventually we're going to get to a point to where taxation is going to be almost nothing. And people are going to be a lot freer, because the fact is we can get rid of things like the NSA. We can have an immigration system where all we're doing is a background check and people can come freely, because we're not promising anything. And it's basically, if you want to come here, you're basically on your own. There's no freeze things. And that's the way things go. And if we do this, we can actually get these things done. But when we have these countries like Israel that are basically taking advantage of us, when we have all these countries around the globe like Saudi Arabia that we're paying every dime for Saudi Arabia's defense, we basically and then Saudi Arabia comes back and states basically that we have to pay high energy costs because they start jacking up the price of oil, and then they end up basically spreading terrorism around the world, because they're the world's largest exporter of terrorism. We basically get ourselves into a lot of trouble. This is why foreign aid is trouble. End of it. And that's where we should be. Now, if you like this, like the video, feel free to comment, click the notification bell, definitely subscribe, share this video around, tell all your friends to subscribe to it, share it all the way on social media. on all your platforms, and I will see you guys later today. Bye, everyone.